Welcome to our panel discussing the pretrial reform package here in Michigan. My name is Josh Ho. I'm the policy manager at dream.org, and we're the national sponsor of the Day of Empathy. I'm also the host of the Decarceration Nation podcast, and many of you in Michigan have known me for the last several years as I worked at Safe and Just Michigan. I want to take just a second to thank everyone at Safe and Just Michigan for the quick pivot after Mother Nature stopped our in-person event, and to everybody who is a co-sponsor and everyone who's worked so hard to make this event happen. We're very lucky to get to start this panel with an introductory message from Representative Donavan McKinney, a Democrat representing the 14th House District. Representative McKinney began his career in public service as a legislative director in the Michigan House of Representatives. He later worked for the nonprofit Community Development Advocates of Detroit and Wayne County Community College District. Soon after, Representative McKinney did political and coalition work for the largest healthcare union in the state, Service Employees International Union Healthcare of Michigan. Thanks for joining us today, Representative. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Josh. Appreciate everybody attending and being flexible due to the extreme weather that's going on today. And for those folks who are going through power outages or no family members, friends, loved ones, continue to check on them. We've been getting updates on the hour, and there are crews out trying to figure out how to get everybody's power on in a timely manner. Again, appreciate everybody for being here today to have this discussion. I'll just say a couple of things, then I have to hop off. But bail reform is not only near and dear to my heart, but a lot of my colleagues. We've been discussing a lot around this issue, around criminal justice as a whole, and bail reform a part of that. One of the things that, we kind of see in terms of the stats and what's already at play is the fact that we have people, human beings, who are literally in cages as we speak because they can't afford to bail themselves out for their liberty and freedom. And that's inhumane in my view. And I'm just glad you guys are having this type of conversation today and this Day of Empathy, because that needs to change. I know the vast majority of people who are literally awaiting trial or haven't even been convicted, I think, are around traffic violations. They're, sometimes they're really wasting months, sometimes years of their life, just awaiting for a hearing to possibly say, hey, you know what, I haven't even done what I've done. So, or have done with what has been presented. So, I really just hope with this Democratic trifecta, we can get something done, and trust and believe we are. Literally, I have to hop off to discuss a criminal justice package right now as we speak, because I've been tapped by the governor as well as some leadership in the legislature to kind of lead that. And I'm hoping bail reform can get over the hump as well. We're discussing, just caveat, we're discussing some stuff around sentencing guidelines reform as well, looking at, pretrial assistance and right to counsel, and a few other things in this package. So please be on the lookout. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out to my office. I can give you guys our office number, 517-373-0140. Again, 517-373-0140, or reach out to your nearest state representative or your senator. But trust and believe we're working on this issue. And I'm just so glad, like I said before, so glad that you guys are having this type of discussion today. And I hope we could have met in person. But even though we don't have session today, they canceled it due to the weather. They still got us in so many meetings. So please forgive me. I wish I could stay the whole time, but just wanted to give my remarks and just say, continue on with the fight, because we are near the finish line. Thank you so much.
Thanks so much, Representative McKinney. Now let me introduce the rest of our panel. Erin Keith currently serves as the Managing Policy Counsel for the Detroit Justice Center, where she leads the organization's advocacy and legislative strategies to transform the criminal legal system. Erin has worked on critical issues, including cash bail reform, which we'll be talking about today, eliminating excessive fines and fees, driver's license reinstatement, and divesting from incarceration to fund community reinvestment, as well as police accountability. Sarah Jones-Moody is a 20-year-old full-time student and soon-to-be entrepreneur who graduated from Pershing High School in 2021. She enjoys writing, reading, and spending time with her puppy. I do that too, my puppy, not hers. She is passionate about family and community and is happy to be here today to speak about the effects of the justice system. I want to start with you, Erin. So I think most people in the room understand what bail and cash bail are. Some of us have experienced it in person. But just in case someone doesn't know, could you kind of briefly explain our system of pretrial detention and release here in Michigan?
Sure, Josh. Thank you for allowing me to be here, and hello, everyone. So cash bail is really the process of paying money or leveraging assets for your freedom while you await further court proceedings or a trial. So at the time of a release determination, an individual is presumed innocent. If cash bail is set, those with money or assets are able to post a determined amount and await their court dates free from jail. Conversely, a person who cannot afford bail does not have that option. They must, utilize a bondsman. They must figure out a way to post, or they will remain incarcerated while they await trial. And so I think that kind of elucidates a larger problem, which is, it's not necessarily a mechanism for ensuring public safety or any of that, because it really comes down to how much money you have. Can you post and secure your freedom and await trial in your community in the comfort of your home, or will you be in a jail cell? So that is the cash bail process. That's kind of how it works. Another key facet I think I'll highlight here is that people don't realize that when you post bond, the purpose of posting is to secure your appearance. And so what that means is if you attend all your court hearings and you've posted a bond amount, that amount is supposed to be returned to you at the conclusion of the proceedings, barring any amount you approve being seized for a potential fine or fee stemming from the case if you're found guilty. And the money is supposed to be returned to you whether you're found innocent, or you're found guilty. What happens is those who use bondsmen to post, many times that mechanism requires a fee for needing to utilize the service at all. So whereas if you were able to post on your own, that money would be returned to you if you attend all hearings. If you need to use a bondsman, that money is theoretically returned to the bonds agency, but they still charge you a percentage fee for needing to post for you. And so with that, I'll turn it back over to you, Josh, but that's kind of painting the picture of how our system functions.
So I think one of the really frustrating things, especially for us who've been through the system, is this notion that you can, I could be in one courtroom and have the money to pay a bond, and someone in the next courtroom has the exact same charges as I do, and they have to spend all their time incarcerated. Now, Sarah, I was lucky enough to have the money to make bail before my sentencing, but can you tell everyone about your experience?
Hi, yes. It's so nice to be here just to get to speak about this experience. Honestly, for me, it was difficult. At the time of my situation, I was only 17 years old. So not only did I not have the almost $8,000, I also was at risk of missing out on my senior year. I had to worry about my mom and my sister struggling, and so much came from just this one little situation that was huge to someone else. It was so small to me, and it just became huge because I didn't have it. My family didn't have it. $7,000 to some people is nothing, but to my family, it was almost $1 million. So I sat there completely alone for 3 months. I was mentally drained. I didn't have anybody to talk to unless I was able to use the phones. And then I had to hope people were able to answer. Sitting in that situation for all that time, only because I didn't have the money, it just made me feel like I was being bullied, kind of. Like, I know why I was in the situation. I understand how the justice system works, but just knowing that, oh, if I had a couple of more dollars, I could be at home right now, it just made it seem like, oh, so this is just because I'm poor. It's not because you think I did something wrong. It's because I don't have the money to fund what you think my freedom is worth.
And Erin, could you also talk about what our pending pretrial reform package here in Michigan is all about, kind of a summary?
Sure. So there are some key components that our pretrial package seeks to ensure change. Key aspects of the bail system that we hope to see continually just transformed by this package. And a few of those that I'd like to highlight are one, the speedy trial provisions. So currently, the way speedy trial is supposed to work, it is a principle of constitutional law, but theoretically, it doesn't have a lot of teeth. And so one aspect that this package would do is ensure that it does have teeth. If 18 months have gone by and an individual is still incarcerated and their case has not proceeded, there's a penalty for that. The case will be dismissed with prejudice. That's one key component to ensure that people are not just sitting incarcerated for months and years awaiting trial. Another key component is kind of defining a difference between someone who willfully skips court or absconds trying to avoid their day in court or avoid what we call adjudication, versus someone who has a life circumstance that comes up and misses court. Carving out a difference between those realities so that people aren't having warrants issued when their child is sick and they don't have childcare and they miss court, so that when they don't get a notice, they simply forgot. You know, they have an opportunity to contact the court and say, hey, this was a genuine mistake. I can come tomorrow. You know, I don't have PTO from work and I can't get off. You know, is there any way I could come on a different day? You know, real life things that people experience, again, while at this point they're presumed innocent. They have not been found guilty of a crime. These baseline concessions and baseline considerations would allow individuals to actually participate in the legal process and actually have their day in court. So those are some other factors. Another key component of the package would be just the concept that all people should not be subjected to cash bail. It's the position of our organization at the Detroit Justice Center that no one should be, you know, subject to wealth-based detention, that practice should end. But the package itself would at least honor the fact that those accused of lower level misdemeanor offenses, such as traffic offenses, which is a key subset of the clients that we serve at DJC, those individuals should not be subject to our cash bail system. In a state where 50% of all prosecutions at one point in Michigan were for non-DUI related traffic offenses, those individuals should not be victims of our cash bail system. So those are just a few highlights that the package would hope to bring. Another, I guess the last point I'd highlight would be the pretrial services aspect. What we found is that in other states that have attempted robust bail reform, pretrial services go hand in hand, and those services need to be free. It should not cost someone if the court is saying, again, while they're presumed innocent, hey, I want you to show up and drug test. It should not cost, someone should not be paying that out of pocket. It should not cost someone to have court reminders. It should not cost someone, if a court is ordering electronic monitoring, for them to have the means to be able to do that is imperative, you know, so that they can comply. So those are key things that the package would hope to do and would really transform how bail looks in Michigan in a positive way that also promotes public safety.
So I think the elephant in the room in these discussions, and I think what happens in most of the press, is a discussion of public safety issues, but I think it's a very incomplete story. And I want to explain why for a second. I'm just the moderator, so I don't usually do this, but I'm going to rant for just a second. You know, when people ask me what kind of package this is, I don't call it a pretrial package. I don't call it a bail package. I call it a public safety package. And there's a reason for that. If you look at all the evidence, and I mean all the evidence, I've spent years reading, you know, hundreds of studies on this question, you're going to find that there is, in the margins, a small increase or decrease depending on the jurisdiction where bail reform has occurred, a small marginal increase or decrease in crime when bail reform gets passed. And some of that has to do with the details of the packages. Sometimes that has to do with a lot of little factors. And to the people that are impacted by that crime, that's really important. I understand that. That's important. The part that gets left out in almost all the coverage of that debate is that pretrial incarceration unquestionably increases crime. And the amount that crime is increased by pretrial incarceration is much larger than those marginal effects. So by passing bail reform, you are increasing public safety. And let me give you kind of a brief explanation of why, in case you're kind of like scratching your head and say, what does that mean? You know, just a couple of months ago, I met someone and their story was that they got arrested and they got incarcerated for 20 days pre-trial because they couldn't afford bail. It turned out that all the charges were dropped after 20 days, which means they were not actually guilty of anything, but they had to spend 20 days incarcerated just because they didn't have money and were charged with a crime. Now, they lost their job in that 20 days, and they almost lost their house. When you have that kind of stress and financial insecurity, you are more likely to do things that are desperate, like commit crimes. So the whole notion that pretrial when you see these press stories, they never talk about that second part. They only talk about the marginal increase or decrease. And to be honest with you, in most places, it is actually a decrease, not an increase, if you compare crime before bail reform to crime after bail reform for people who would have been bail eligible. Now, Erin, after I've gone on my rant, what is your take on the public safety question with pretrial reform and kind of the media role in politicizing reform?
No, Josh, I think your comments were spot on. I think when we're looking at what makes a community safe, I think too often we stop at incarceration. We are satisfied by that answer. And the reality is there's so many other facets of public safety that we should be considering. The Federal Reserve reports that 68% of Americans cannot afford a $400 emergency. I'll say that again, 68% of Americans cannot afford a $400 emergency. And so what that means is when you're depriving people of their liberty over such a nominal amount of money in many instances, what ends up happening is you destabilize their whole way of life. You destabilize their whole ability to provide for their family if they lose their job. You destabilize their ability to pursue other employment if they have a warrant issued for non-appearance. There are so many ways that incarceration, even just for a day, can impact someone's life. And those key components play into the public safety debate. They're critical aspects that we have to consider. And so I think we have to resist the fear mongering that always happens when we discuss how improving our bail system and transforming it would improve public safety. It would, in fact, make our communities safer because we would not be destabilizing individuals who are just trying to live their lives and who are merely, again, accused of a crime.
And Sarah, I think one people never count when they're talking about public safety is the safety of the people and families impacted by pretrial arrest and incarceration. Could you talk a little bit about what you think when you hear people talking about public safety in relation to what you experienced?
Well, in my situation, I honestly, it was a point in time where my family had to become homeless on account of me not being at home with my mom and my sister. And my mom and my sister are all I have. So imagine how I felt talking to my mom and hearing her voice break because she knows she can't get me home, because she knows she don't even have nowhere for me to come home to. So for that whole 3 months, and actually sometime after when I finally did come home, it was just me and my mom and my sister trying to figure it out. And if I would have been home for those couple of months and I would have just been able to continue working, I would have been able to help my mom take this money and use it for a bill instead of using it to make sure I'm able to eat while I'm in here, or to make sure that I can call home to talk to her while I'm in there. So honestly, we don't think enough about how the families of these people who are accused and have not been found guilty of a crime they still have to worry about what their family is going to do, especially if they're one of the people that helps to provide. I was one of the people that helped my mom provide. So when I had to go away, it was just her trying to figure things out while still trying to take care of me and my sister at the same time.
Another thing we hear sometimes in opposition to pretrial reform is this notion of appearance rates. I think you talked about this a little bit already, Erin. Do you want to talk a little bit more about if this objection stands up any better than the public safety objection?
Sure, Josh. So I think this is one of the common misconceptions, if you will, around cash bail, that someone posting a certain amount of money secures their appearance at a hearing. First off, a lot of this rhetoric and these principles come from, English common law. They're practices from years and years ago that don't hold up in modern day, to full stop. For starters, I can think of many of the clients that I've personally represented prior to transitioning to a policy role who skipped court even after posting bond. And there's several reasons that occurred. First off, again, they might not have had PTO. They might have literally, the choice was attend court on a traffic infraction and lose my job, lose my ability to pay my bills, lose my ability to provide for my children, or lose $100 and wait for DPD or someone else to literally come find me. So the bail amount did not dissuade them from skipping court because they didn't want to lose their job. And I think that there's a middle ground in between. What actually has been shown to secure appearance at a hearing and what has been shown to improve appearance rates is simple court reminders. Research has shown that where automated phone calls were implemented, failure to appear rates dropped by 37% in this jurisdiction. And where text reminders were implemented, appearance rates increased by 26%, along with a cost saving to those respective jurisdictions. When you compare that to what happens and what's standard in many Michigan courts, those practices are not at play. Typically, a notice is sent via snail mail if it's sent at all, and it may be sent to an incorrect address, an old address, or the person might be housing unstable and not have an address. And so you're creating a dynamic where something so simple in the technology age that we live in that would actually be cheaper than sending mail could be implemented to actually ensure that people have a fighting chance to attend court. Another key component that has been found to increase appearance rates and to ensure individuals come are providing transportation and providing even a one-time opportunity to reschedule. And to give context for that in Michigan, so currently most courts, I can't speak for every district court across Michigan because things are not standardized in that way, but most courts do not have a mechanism for if you are an individual who is potentially utilizing a public defender, you cannot contact the court on your own and request an adjournment. If something comes up, I had a client who had COVID and needed to reschedule. I had a client who lost a parent to COVID and the funeral was the same day as the hearing. That individual could not contact the court directly to even present the COVID test or the funeral booklet or something like that to explain to the judge why they needed, had a very legitimate reason for needing to miss a traffic court case. Instead, they called and left a voicemail that was never actually gotten by the judge, and a warrant was issued, and the cycle starts all over. Compared to me as an attorney, I can pick up the phone and request an adjournment. I can contact the clerk. I know how to do those things. But that same grace should be extended to individuals who, again, are merely accused of a crime, especially where it's shown to increase appearance rates. And so there are several mechanisms that are better than utilizing cash as a way to get someone into a courthouse.
And Sarah, you've been through this. Do you feel like some of those mechanisms would have helped you in your situation?
Yes, definitely. If I had the opportunity to talk to the clerk and let them know that I wasn't gonna be able to make it on this day, and honestly, if I had better communication all throughout the process, I think it would have been better. There was times where I had no idea that I had a court case coming up, and especially with me being a juvenile, it was even harder because now nobody actually has access to this information besides my lawyer and the judge. So I went through so many different channels trying to look for information that should have been right there for me, even if it had just been an email. just sent to my email address that I could just check and see, oh, I have to be there on this day, versus me having to find out that I missed court. It would have definitely made the process a lot smoother for me, and it would have helped me to get out of the situation sooner than I did.
And Josh, just to add one thing, I want to make a quick note in my explanation as well, that a key thing is when the difference between someone who's represented by private counsel and versus someone who's represented by a public defender. An individual who's represented by a public defender may have one courtroom counsel representing them at their initial hearing, a different courtroom counsel representing them at the next hearing. So it's not as simple as even contacting the attorney that you previously had and saying, hey, can you help me contact the court? I mean, literally, some people have no mechanism of contacting anyone who could advocate on their behalf. So I just wanted to make that point clear as well.
Yeah, I mean, it's tough. And I mean, even when for a lot of people who are struggling, the idea of a private attorney is just not something you could even consider. I mean, just in my case, mine costs thousands and thousands of dollars. And, it's a tough situation. I think one of the things that we're really struggling with, despite being really, if I were to sit down and have a fact-based discussion where we were just talking about the data with anyone, I feel like I could very clearly win those discussions, but we seem to continuously lose kind of a media narrative that is based in creating fear. A lot of times not based or grounded in reality, more based in anecdotes. And I was wondering if you had any thoughts after all the years we've both been working on this in Michigan about how we might confront that, Erin.
It's tough. I think we really have to just continue to be firm in our stance and be diligent. I mean, we have an opportunity in Michigan for the first time in a long time to really transform the way this looks. The governor convened a task force in 2020 with regard to what we need to do to improve our pretrial system. We've studied this issue into,
Let me break in for just a second. Let me mention, as someone who attended every single one of those task force meetings, that task force included prosecutors, police, sheriffs, county officials, legislators. Every single aspect of the justice system was represented, and this package is what came out of that. Is that right?
That's correct. And again,
and it was bipartisan too, rigorously
bipartisan. So it's like when you had individuals who could theoretically reach across the aisle, across different life experiences, across different interests, and come together and make a report with recommendations. We need to be diligent in ensuring that we do something about this. We don't need to wait for the next crazy story. We don't need to wait for the next Khalif Browder or the next woman who has to give birth on the floor of the Macomb County Jail. We need to act. We need to do something about this and stop waiting for the right moment. The moment is now. The moment is upon us. And if we don't act now, then we have to live with that as individuals, knowing that we could have done something about this and we chose not to.
I think that's a really important point. I unfortunately spent time in the Macomb County Jail, and it is a pretty unique place. I mean, just in the few years that I was around there, I think 17 people died. We didn't have the kitchen was shut down for black mold when I was there. What people don't think about is a lot of the folks who are in pretrial incarceration are actually innocent, and jail is a dangerous place and people die in jails. And so when Erin's saying that we need to take this seriously on a moral level, I think that's really important, because literally people die in jails. Our jails are not safe places. And a lot of, you can think of whatever you want to think about just deserts, and some people committed crimes and you're not going to get it. But the truth is, a lot of the people who are in jail, I talked to you just a second ago about someone who spent 20 days in jails, and then every single charge was dropped. Those people can get hurt in jails. We have moral responsibility for people's safety. So Sarah, if if you were on the floor of the legislature right now and they were asking you why they should consider passing pretrial reform, I mean, they're going to hear all the narratives, they're going to hear all the media reports, they're going to hear whatever. What are you going to say to them?
First thing I would say is just a simple question. When you see a leak in your roof at your house, don't you fix it? If your car runs out of gas, you fill it back up. When you need an oil change, you make sure you get that done. Why do we treat our government like it's the one thing that never needs to be fixed? Sometimes we have to think about it, and we have to remember that these rules have been set in place for years. We have a whole new generation of people. We have all this new technology. We have all of these new expansions and all of this new stuff, but we still choose to leave our justice system in the past. Why is it that we replace our cars every few years, but our justice system just stays and our rules just stay the same forever? I feel like if we want to progress and move forward as a country, we have to start somewhere. And the place to start is here. Bail reform should have been one of the first things that we worked on, because it's honestly, it is set to keep impoverished people impoverished. If you have a family member that you know is innocent, but you don't have the money to get them out, what are you going to think of? Oh, I have to just leave my family member in jail. No, you're going to try to figure out a way to get them out. And now you're possibly putting yourself in a situation to be in the same situation that they're in, simply because you know that they should be at home with you. So I feel like as a nation, and not even as a nation, just as this state, Michigan, we should realize by now that we are at a point where we can make change. Why stop the changes from coming?
Erin, so I mean, we've both been in this situation before. Let's say that the committee hearing is next week, and you're the next one to speak, and we know everything we know, and we've been through this for all this time. What are you going to say to the legislature and anyone who happens to be listening now from that group to say this is the time? Let's do it this time.
I think, honestly, what I've already stated is that the time is, in fact, now. We cannot keep waiting to do this. We cannot keep twiddling our thumbs while people every day are pleading guilty because they just want to go home. Like, that is, it's honestly, it's morally, it's just beyond. Like, I'm almost at a loss for words because I'm so passionate about it. It boggles my mind that we know what the issues are. We have the data, we have the reports, we have the research, we convened the studies. We know what needs to be done. We just need to do it. I would say to legislatures, if you campaigned on racial justice issues, this is a racial justice issue. If you campaigned on socioeconomic issues, this is a socioeconomic issue. If you care about families, this is an issue of family preservation, ensuring that kids are not ending up in the foster care system because their parent is incarcerated for a crime they may have not even committed. If you care about workforce development, this is a workforce development issue because people have convictions and lose their jobs. It impacts every aspect of our community, whether it's your day-to-day reality or not. And point blank period, you don't have to commit a crime to be accused of committing one and end up at the mercy of the justice system. So really, it's a point of privilege that people aren't more riled up, that there are not more people at a loss for words with how unjust this is. So I think we should make sure we pay attention to the developments that are happening with the package and continue to put our, pressure on legislators and say, we can do something about this. If you care about all of these issues that you campaigned on, then this is an issue for you to work on.
Well, that seems like, what I was hoping to do is have, and it looks like we have a few minutes. If anyone has any questions, I'm looking at the chat. For some reason, I can't respond in the chat. So anyone who said nice things up to now, thank you for that. So if anyone has any quick questions, I'm looking to see if they come up, and I'll ask the panel.
Erin, even going back to what you said as far as pleading guilty to go home, that happened with me. I was terrified that I was just gonna have to just sit there. And so when I was given the opportunity to go home, I took it. Even though I could have potentially fought and won, it was just too scary to fight.
And I want to honor you for sharing your story, Sarah. It's very brave of you to show up in this space with all of these advocates and to be so vulnerable. So I want to thank you for bringing this issue to life and being willing to even be here and participate. It just speaks volumes over, how this situation has impacted you, but also how you've been able to utilize it and find your own voice and your own power. So kudos to you for that.
Thank
Yeah, I
you.
want to echo that. This is the second time Sarah's done this for us, and I really, really appreciate her coming on again. The first question I got is, what is the bill package that we should be pushing? Are there bill numbers? Erin?
So currently, we are still awaiting the reintroduction of the package, which we hope will come soon. That is why we need to continue to put pressure on our legislators and say, we want you all to take this up. We want you all to work on this. So I would say stay tuned, and hopefully we will have bill numbers soon.
Yeah, this is the disadvantage of the same package being reintroduced in multiple different sessions, is they have to reintroduce them. The next question I have is, how can these resources become available? And I'm going to guess that that's referring to pretrial services, which is part of the package. Erin, do you want to take that one?
Right. So really the key comes down to getting it passed and then getting it funded. We have to make it so that those who need to access pretrial services, anything from those that aren't punitive, like court reminders, like transportation assistance, down to things that the court might feel are necessary conditions, such as electronic monitoring, such as alcohol testing, drug testing, things like that, depending on the nature of the offense. And so the key thing is, again, while someone is presumed innocent, these services need to be made available so that people are able to comply, so that it is not a poverty crime, essentially, when they are non-compliant. And we can make these available. We just have to put our heads together and get legislators and officials in the room who are eager and willing to sit down, crunch the numbers, and figure out how to make it happen.
So the next panel that's going to be starting at 1 o'clock is a panel put together by Nation Outside, which is a statewide organization led entirely by formerly incarcerated people. I've been a member for a really long time. I think it's going to be a really good panel. So I hope you'll use the same link that you used for this to join that panel at 1 o'clock. And I really want to thank Sarah and Erin, who I think did an amazing job of discussing this. And I hope people have learned something about our bail reform package that'll hopefully be reintroduced soon. As you know, the session has been closed, and so a lot of things that were going to be introduced this week have not been introduced. So thanks again for joining us, and hope you'll all join the 1 o'clock panel. And thanks for being part of the 2023 now virtual Day of Empathy.